Well, this video's been a long time in the making, not only because I've made a few videos talking about Sonic Frontiers before its launch, but on top of that, just witnessing the real-time redemption arc that this franchise went under in the span of 4 years is honestly crazy. Because we went from a society that actively mocked and treated Sonic as the biggest joke in gaming discussion, to a society that just re-embraced Sonic as something that was the new cool thing once again. Granted, we did go through some rough times with that horrible first trailer and teaser for the Sonic movie, and then also the horrible IGN preview, but things progressively got better as time went on. Especially because we actually got to see gameplay from multiple sources that wasn't just IGN, and by the time that we got a public demo that was basically reaffirming people that this game was gonna be good, it was honestly such an awesome time to be there. Because you had Sonic fans and non-Sonic fans rejoicing and getting collectively hyped over the new game. And if I were to relive that moment all over again, you know darn well that I would. But now that we're done talking about all the anticipation, how about we move on into the gameplay? So, when it comes to the gameplay of Sonic Frontiers, it's split in between two segments. Because for one thing, you have cyberspace, which is basically the stand-in layer part of this game, and then you also have the open zones, which are basically the main gimmick of it being the open world segment. But because cyberspace is the first part that we're introduced to, how about I talk about that one first? Now, if I were going to give my opinion on cyberspace, I have to say, it's decent for the most part. I find it to be pretty enjoyable, but at the same time, it's not something that I would put over any of the past Sonic games, including Forces. Because, see, if there's one thing which I really liked about the boost, it had to be about how it not only served as a tool, but as an offensive weapon. Because whenever you used it, it was a way to not only keep your speed up, but also as a way to, I don't know, knock enemies out of the way without having to go through some extra hoops in order to avoid them. Because if you do something as simple as run into an enemy while boosting in Sonic Frontiers, well, it's like hitting a brick wall. You're just gonna stop dead in your tracks. Same thing counts with just jumping and then the drop dash, which just feels almost entirely useless in this game. And I'm just gonna be honest here, if they made it to where it didn't feel like there was so much of a delay between attacks, like whenever you homing attack the enemy, as opposed to feeling like you're just stuck there for like 3 seconds before you could eventually move on, then maybe I would find it a lot more tolerable. And if there was another thing which I just want to talk about, it probably has to be the themes. Now that we know about what cyberspace is, with it basically being like an alien archive, I was thinking that, okay, maybe we could have some type of levels that kind of dive into that idea, because it's not just Sonic's memories, it's the memories of this entire ancient civilization, but that's something that's like barely utilized on to the very minimum. But if I were to give it credit where credit is due, I do like how there's a sense of variety when it comes to the level design, even though even there it could be a bit of a hit or miss type deal. But now that we're done talking about cyberspace, how about I move into the open zone? So when it comes to the open zone aspect of this game, I have to say, just like cyberspace, it's pretty fun as well. And if I were going to describe it in a very basic way, I have to say, it's like a Ubisoft game, but also a bit like a collectathon, but if said collectathon had an emphasis on speed, because you're essentially collecting a whole lot of things just in order to do basic progression. You need memory tokens in order to talk to your friends and progress the story. You need portal gears in order to go enter cyberspace. You need keys in order to get Chaos Emeralds, and Chaos Emeralds in order to go fight each of the Titans and move on from one island into another island. It is a pretty simple gameplay loop, which I find to be pretty fun. Though if I were going to say one thing, I feel like this game kind of lacks challenge. Now, So hey everyone, this is post-editing Lone Wolfs here. So I found the guy's channel when I was searching through my email, and yeah, I'm gonna go leave the link to his video in the description, so make sure to go check him out after this, or right now. So yeah, that's all, and back to the video. There was one YouTuber which I swear to God I tried finding a whole lot of times that I couldn't remember the name of the video, where basically one of his criticisms around Sonic Frontiers was that when it came to the speed challenges in this game, They literally were not really challenges. They were just more or less running in a straight line from one place to another, and I could just do nothing but agree with him when it comes to that aspect. Because sure, while the simple puzzles and basic challenges in this game are fine, I kind of feel like when you have a character named Sonic, you don't really utilize that at a setting to where you could just kind of manipulate the environment to do whatever you want. It kind of sucks. And if there was one place which I really feel like this could have really benefited the game, I have to say, one of my favorite moments in the open zones are just these times where you're rather climbing this big ass tower or going through a huge mega structure or something, and you're just feeling so small and insignificant to it all. And I feel like, you know what, if the developers really wanted to, they could have made it to where these places were like a shrine or temple to where test the player's skills for what they've learned so far, and I just kind of feel like it would have made these places stand out a whole lot more as opposed to the first time. Because going through that cool desert temple, or not desert temple, but desert tunnel was pretty cool. Same thing with that giant location that was on Chaos Island. Like, once again, I feel like that idea could have been really utilized a whole lot more, especially since the speed challenges only start to really get interesting towards the end, because there's this one on the final island where you actually need to be somewhat precise with your movement so you don't mess it up and actually get there in time. And also, let's talk about the combat. Now, in one of my previous videos, I ignorantly said, oh, but this is the first time that Sonic has a fully in-depth combat system, when Sonic Unleashed did that. And if I were going to say anything, technically speaking, or speaking on a technical level, Sonic Unleashed has a better combat system because it's more in-depth with what it tries to do as a God of War clone. But with Sonic Frontiers, it's basic and fun, though it can kind of feel a bit redundant with certain enemies. Because see, there's two different types of enemies in this game, just like in any other Sonic game. There's cannon fodder, and then there's the mini-bosses, and then there's the actual bosses, and trust me, I'm gonna get to the Titans in a second. But if I were to elaborate, when it comes to the cannon fodder enemies, or just minions as I'm going to call them for the rest of this video, I kind of feel like sure, they start off fine and they don't really pose a real challenge, but they do get annoying to deal with as the game progresses, because they start off as these enemies that can essentially just be one tap to these enemies that, you know, kind of take a little bit of time to get rid of, but then they do this really annoying thing where they throw up a shield and it just throws your entire thing off balance. Especially because with the targeting system of this game, it's kind of hard to choose one enemy from another, so they just kind of all do it and you just end up falling straight on your ass while doing it. And when it comes to the Guardians of this game, I was about to say Titans, the Guardians can range from decent to just repetitive. So for example, when it comes to the ninja and tower and the squid and the what was it, oh yeah, and the fortress ones, yeah sure, those guys are fine, but when it comes to the rest of them, like, you know, that Evangelion looking motherfucker, the caterpillar, and the shark, I think you guys are starting to get what I mean. Like, I like the sense that there's a sense of variety when it comes to these guys, or when it comes to these mini-bosses, but at the same time, I just kind of feel like, well, some are fun to fight because they actually challenge the player on timing and stuff like that. Other ones just kind of feel drawn out for the sake of being drawn out, you know. But now that we're done talking about that, how about I move on into the Titans? Now, in most cases, it would be a very stupid thing to advertise your first boss as the big bad, because now that I think about it, when it comes to Giganto, this guy's pretty much been in all the promotion from this game, even when we barely even got to see him properly. But man, let me tell you, when you finally turn into Super Sonic, it feels so empowering, because the Titan boss fights feel like the perfect sense of scale and spectacle for each island, and honestly feel like such a nice power trip, because you go from getting your ass beat by these guys or running away from them because they are just way out of your league in the beginning, to just absolutely racking on them, and it is perfect, especially because every music choice just makes you feel so powerful. It makes you feel like you can climb a fucking mountain. Like, there's a reason why Sonic Frontiers status exists, because the music just genuinely goes hard. But now that we're done talking about the Titans, how about we move on into the story? Now, if I were to say anything about Sonic Frontiers' story, I have to say on one hand, it feels like a bit of a love letter to the franchise to anyone that just hated the fact that Sonic's turns have more or less just been background props that haven't really contributed anything to the story and have more or less just been static characters. But then on the other hand, I just kind of feel like this game suffers from great build-up, but horrible payoff. And let me explain. So there's a few elements in this game to where I feel like, you know what, despite the character interactions being decent, on the other hand, they just kind of have a horrible payoff. So for example, Sonic Cyber Corruption. This thing has been something that has been teased since the very beginning with the marketing and all. But at the same time, despite it having a pretty important role when it comes to the story, it's something that is so meaningless when it comes to when it finally pays off, because it's something that's so easily defeated with the power of friendship. And I'm gonna be real here, I don't got a problem with the power of friendship in something like Sonic, because that shit could be fucking awesome. Just look at the ending of Sonic Unleashed, or Sonic Heroes, or in worst case scenario, Sonic Forces. Like, come on, that shit's badass. But it just kind of feels like it was so underwhelming when it came to its execution, because they're just like, wait a minute, that was it? Same thing when it comes to other things like Sage as a character, which I have to say, yeah, she's decent, but at the same time, she doesn't really contribute anything to the story. She doesn't really act overly antagonistic towards Sonic, more like a weird observer which will occasionally throw an obstacle at him, which you will casually deal with. And when it comes to her and Eggman's relationship with this whole father and daughter dynamic, it's just like, yeah, it's cute and all, but it just kind of feels like we barely even got to see that happen. Like, the most that we get to see when it comes to Eggman starting to have feelings for his creation as like a father-daughter thing is like an audio logs, which you need to go through by rather watching YouTube videos or just by doing the fishing mini game that Big has. I think you guys are starting to see my point. Hell, this even goes over to things like the final Titan and the final boss of the game, which just feels so underwhelming when it comes to everything else that was built up throughout the entirety of the game. And sure, while the ending is decent and opens up some possibilities for what may happen in the future, I just kind of feel like Sonic Team it just kind of feels like Sonic Team, while they were doing something great in the beginning, just kind of faltered towards the ending. You're right, Faye. Despite Sonic Frontiers having a relatively long dev cycle for a Sonic game, this game suffered a lot from rushed development, and not because of Sonic Team themselves, but because of Sega. And it's not some type of surprising news either, because it's been confirmed that Sonic Team's main director was basically fighting tooth and nail for some extra time on this game. I could only imagine about how worse it would have turned out if this game actually came out at an earlier time, with this game possibly turning out to be just like that IGN preview, if not worse. So I feel like if this was the compromise which they had to make to where the game ended up having a pretty mid-ending despite some great build-up, I would take that rather than a game that just kind of feels mid throughout its entirety. Oh, I gotta mention the DLC. Well, now that you mentioned it, so, despite Sonic Frontiers having a pretty lackluster ending, this game ended up turning out to be successful. And I mean very successful. So much to the point to where Sega themselves were like, hey guys, you're not just getting cosmetic DLC in the future, you're gonna get a full DLC roadmap. And not just with some quality of life features either, like challenge modes and all that type of stuff, but being able to play as other characters and with a story attached to it. Yeah guys, I managed to predict the future before this game even came out. That's honestly kind of wild. Now, I have heard some people say that this is probably stuff that was supposed to be in the game from the get-go, and in all honesty, with the whole rush development thing, I wouldn't put it past Sonic Team if that was the case. But overall, I honestly feel like the future for Sonic as a franchise is bright. Not only with the movies turning out well and with Sonic Frontiers being successful, but also with the great news that Sonic Team themselves is expanding their dev team and is gonna get more people working on a new game. So I'm hoping that in the best case scenario that after this, that Sonic Team is able to cope without Sega interfering, and that they can improve upon the flaws of this game while also building upon it to make an even better game than this. In a way, it's almost like we're striving towards a one-way dream. So that was the Sonic Frontiers review, everyone. Sorry that this video kind of took forever to come out, but you know, as I always say, how life happens and how, you know, you can kind of get distracted with things. And you know what, I kind of feel like this video coming out a few months later kind of works for me in hindsight, because I know that if this review were to come out way earlier, I probably would have fumbled the bag because I'd be way too filled with hype to actually criticize the things that I brought up in the video. But aside of that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope to see y'all in another video coming soon, and as always, see y'all later.